Can you see? Hello?
Yes, I can see.
Yeah. The first thing is that today we are going to discuss about the plot and structure of a story writing. And the first thing is that here we are going to discuss about the how a short story has to be written, and we are going to cover introduction, important aspects of form, how to make short story interesting, how to make the short story appear true, and how to give meaning to a short story, and how a climax has to be. And also, one of the great thinker by name Herbert Reed has told that all art is an order of form. And also, it is one of the famous statement which talks about the story. What is a story and how it has to be written? What are the things which we have to incorporate in writing a story? That is, the first thing is the plot, the structure, and the form, and all these things are very important. And also, there has to be a formal structure for the short story. And also, we wish to write, and we try to make an arrangement of characters which interact with incidents, situations for greater effectiveness. And also, this is a skill which lies in making it appear that there is no conscious arrangements, no contrivances, no plot, or to deceive the reader, and thus it could well have happened that way. And also, here we can see that what all the things we are going to incorporate in a story. The first thing is that how we are going to discuss or about the formal structure and arrangement of characters which interact with incidents, situations for greater effectiveness. And also, we have to give a well thought out design so that the story is neither dull nor diffusive nor meaningless to achieve the purpose. So these are the things, the important things we have to keep in the mind while writing a story. And how to make the short story interesting. The first thing is that what are the things we are in need of making a short story very interesting. So the first thing is that we have to keep that in our mind, that how to make it interesting. See, what are the things should be incorporated in a short story to make it interesting? And for example, you might have listened to your parents or grandmother when you are a child, the narration of a story. So, how eager you were to listen to that, what's going to happen next. So, in that way, it should be very interesting. So the second point is how to say, is it true? The second point, what you have to keep in your mind is that how it is true to the real life. And the third point is that how best to give a meaning to it. So you have to keep in your mind that how important or how interesting the storyline is. So you might have heard about the story of Cinderella and many other Aesopian stories, and even the folk tales which has been narrated by your parents to you. So these are the things which make the listener very interesting. So the first thing, how to make the short story interesting, that is need for a design. There should be you first thing is that you have to have a design in your mind. So as we plan, when we before constructing a house, we have a blueprint. In the same manner, we should have a design before writing a story. The second point is the manner of telling. So, what are the means or the modes or the way you are going to narrate the story? So, you have to give importance, make sure that there is a constant sense of movement in the plot. So when you start narrating a story, there should be constant sense. The movement in the plot should go as if it is not, there is no in hurdles, or it should move in a smoother way. So involve the reader to make it appear that you are talking to and not to him. So you have to make the reader to get involved in reading the story, that he becomes part and parcel of it as if it is taking place in front of him. And also try to build up a certain in suspense in the mind of the reader. So a kind of climax has to be brought in the mind of the reader when you write a story. So these things you have to keep in your mind to make a short story very interesting.
ಮೇಡಮ್ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಪವರ್
Slides
ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್
move.
ಸ್ಲೈಡು
So here it is moving, sir. For me, it is moving.
ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ ಮೇಡಮ್? ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ನನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಸರ್.
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಮೇಡಮ್.
ಸೊ ಒನ್ಸ್ ಅಗೇನ್
ನಮಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಮೂವ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇವಾಗ ಬಂತು. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಎವರಿ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್. ಯಾ ಎವರಿ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ರೈಟ್.
Now it's coming. So make sure that there is a constant sense of movement in the plot. And also, these are the facts you have to keep in your mind before writing a story. And then how to make the short story appear true. So you have to give importance to these things when you narrate or when you start writing a story. An interesting plot may be poor fantasy that will perhaps interest only certain types of readers. See, when you write a story, when you are writing a story for the small kids or the age group between 10, so that you have to give importance to the pure fantasy world, and which should be very interesting to the reader or the listener. And also, it varies from the age group. So when you start writing for the kids or for the adolescents or the grown-ups, even the form, the content, the theme undergo changes. And also the way you convey the things to the students or the reader is very important, because it should reach the listener or the reader for whom you are writing. The second point, the human condition could be either universal or social, related to a given time and place. See, when you choose the characters for writing a short story, you have to give the universal, or you have to either take up the things which are present in the whole world, or which is the part and parcel of the society and which is related to a given time and place. See, we have to keep in our mind for whom we are writing. And also, we have to see for what age group we are writing and what is the world around us in which we are living. We can't write the classical stories for the present generation because they will not be interested. So when you write a story, you have to keep the society of the time in your mind. The reader should be able to accept characters as real men interacting with real events. So the reader should feel that he is interacting with a character who is living in and around him. So it should be true to the life. So these points you have to keep in mind. And the next point is that familiar yet new. So the story must have lived through a storm sometime or other in your life, but if your story is based on it, you could embellish it with a fury of such dimensions that it will savor of a new and existing experience. So you should have a familiarity of the things about what you are writing. Either it is an incident which has taken in the past or which has taken place in your life. But when you explain it, it should not diminish the savior of a new and existing experiences. So you should not come out with the same kind, you should try to give the same kind of experience what you might have done. Make it plausible. There is also a limit to your proper portrayal of reality. So when you portray about the reality, you should have certain limitations. See, everything cannot be revealed. You should try to write in such a way that it is true or it is reality. How to give meaning to a short story. So how you are going to give the meaning to a short story is important. dangers of digressions and dilutions, danger of defection, message, and comment. These three things you have to keep in your mind when you uh, give meaning to a short story. And also, the climax is very important in the short story. So, what is the climax? And also, here you try to see that when you start writing, there should be uh, make that there is a kind of involvement in the students and also the reader, and the reader to make it appear that you are talking to and not to him. And also you should try to say that how to give meaning to a short story means danger of digression, and the last slide I say is danger of digression and delusion. See, a reader should never find himself compelled to ask. So the reader shouldn't have any kind of question in his mind when he go through his story. He should get everything in that. So what does it all mean? So what is the purpose of writing this story? He wouldn't ask the question if the meaning comes through without any special effort on his paint. And so sooner than he himself or finish reading. So, for example, you'll be happy if you understand that you are not really saying wrong things about love, or what you were only making fun of a certain class of people. So, when you explain or when you start writing, you have to see that the question should not arise in the mind of the listener or the reader. See, what's the purpose of writing? So, everybody should, by the time you reach the end of the story, you should come to know what is the purpose of knowing this writing this story. So here, the one more thing, danger of digression and delusion is that you have to, they are interrelated, or delusion or usually interrelated, we can see, and that you tend to forget that what you are writing is a short story and not a novel. See, when you start writing a story, you should not bring all the elements of a novel in writing a short story, because short story is picked up from the life of the protagonist to one or two incidents, that's it, not more than that. So it should run around that and where it gets a solution to that. So it should not be very lengthy, too many characters should not be brought in the short story, what we can see in the novel. And also the entire sequence of characters and events must be bound in a short story, and there should be unity of impressions which uh, alone would yield the desired meaning. So when you start writing, keep these points that one or two incidents from the life of a person or a subject or an object, whatever you choose for writing, should be picked up in writing a short story. So some, whatever you are tempted to do, you must remember that it should fall within the ambit or the central design what you have planned for writing. The second point here is danger of defection. So danger of defection is that changing the track in the midway, it's always undesirable. So, what plot you have designed, you should go in the same line. You should not shift from one story or one incident to another incident in between writing the plot. So, it will be cynical if you introduce something else in between the storyline. So, before writing, decide your commitments and priorities well in advance, and do not forget what your central theme is. See, what is the purpose of writing the story should be always remembered by you. So, and also the last thing is that message and comment. Whatever the message you wanted to deliver or transform, either it is emotional responses of the writer, because sometimes you, for example, when you watch a movie, you become one with the character. If something happens to the actor, you feel that as if it has happened to you. Such kind of an involvement should be there in the story which you are writing. They should feel that as if it is happening in and around them. So the whatever the message or the comment you are trying to say, or the reader which you may have predetermined, amused, so it should consist of wonder, anger, desires, whatever the things it might be, but it should reach to the reader. And also, modern literature is growing more and more cerebral, we can say, and also, hopefully, as a part of the evolutionary process, you can see that the story, the message should be implicit in the story, and also the authoritarian voice should be there so that it can understand what you are trying to say, and also what is the purpose of writing the story. Every story should have a moral ending, or a climax should end in such a way where it reaches the mind of the reader. So, whatever you have to say should better be derived from the complexity of ideas, whether it is yielding some food for thought or something else. So, in that way, you have to give importance to these 3 points when you write in a story. How you have to give meaning to a short story. And the last part is in that is climax. What is climax? Not the climax, it is the denouncement or the ending of the story. See, every story, as so we have read whatever the stories we have heard or read from our childhood, it has a message at the end. So what he says that it not necessarily logical. So whatever the ending might be, there should not be logical ending, he says that, but it should convey something to it. So a climax need necessarily be the logical culmination of a purpose of aspect. So it could even be illogical, or what is now known popularly as an anticlimax. So what he tried to say here is that not necessarily logical. So we should not keep that a kind of logic has to be rendered at the end of the story, but there should be logic, or without logic also you can write a short story. But the anticlimax is not a negation of climax in the artistic sense. So, an underestimate or a whimper instead of the bang that the reader was expecting can be no less devastating in component and ants. So either it should be there should be logical, or antilogical ending should not be there, but the ending should pass certain message to the reader. And also he says that not a resolution of the conflict. So you should not keep that it has to be like this or that. It may as well rise the issues to a state of confrontations, or in which they have to be squarely faced and resolved by the protagonist. So it can be resolved by the protagonist, that is the hero of the story, or the instancy of awareness that is though brought about would be a satisfying result, or the end would be the satisfying result for the reader. So we can't say that the climax should be like this only. It can, the ending can satisfy the reader's thoughts also. And the other element is surprise as essential. The element of surprise is very essential, not essential, he says that. So a climax does not always have to come upon the reader with a suddenness, with a twist or sting in the tail, though that has been the traditional mode. So here we have seen that in the past, in the if you're a viewer of movies, a 70s, 80s, 90s movie, it used to end in a traditional way. But here it ends in an abstract manner. In the present movies, some movies ends in an abstract manner where you have to search the meaning for yourself, what happens at the climax. So the element of surprise is not very much essential in the ending of story. So, and also the revelation may as well as be summing up. Here we can see that what matters is that it should be satisfying to the reader. So it should satisfy the reader whether it has whatever the message you're trying to convey as read the reach the listener. So, this is the first part, that when we start writing a story, we have to keep in our mind the plot and the structure in our mind. So, what is the purpose of writing? For whom we are writing? What is the theme we have chosen? Whether it's going to reach the mass for whom we are writing. So, when you write for the children's, you have to step down to the level of the children's and write. And also, you should keep in your mind for whom you're writing. And when you write for the kids, you have to give but you have to try to see that the language what you use and the images what you use which reaches the student. So in that way you can have a clear cut image of a short story. So the first thing, as it has been even told by our great Greek philosopher Aristotle, plot plays a very important part in designing any story. So, in that way, plot is the heart and soul of the story what you are writing. So, even characters plays a very important role. So, there should not be too many characters in writing a short story. It should revolve within or within a small range of people who are known to the protagonist. So, okay, we are going to move to the second unit, that is atmosphere. Why atmosphere is very important for the short story writing. And what are the objects we are going to discuss here is the atmosphere is used to describe the dominant mood as created by the setting, descriptions, and dialogues. And also, atmosphere is a part of fiction, whether long or short. It enables a writer to establish lifelikeness and win the reader's willingness to accept the world created by the short storyteller. Atmosphere is a necessity for fiction as it is for our planet. It is one of the basic elements in a short story. See, atmosphere plays a very important role in writing long or whatever it might be. Either it is a short story or a long story. It enables the writer to establish lifelikeness and win the reader's willingness to accept the world which has been created by the storyteller. See, for example, the atmosphere, if it is a rainy day, you have to talk about the rainy day and what are the things which happens on that particular time. And also you have to keep atmosphere in our mind. So if you're writing or if you have chosen a topic which takes place in a forest or in a house or anywhere, it should be related to that particular place itself. It should not get diluted from the forest to a desert. So in that way, atmosphere is a part of a fiction, either it is long or short. And also, atmosphere is the thing which binds the story together. See, why atmosphere is very important? Because atmosphere is the one which binds the story together. It brings everything into one uh, object or subject. It acts the time frame past, present, or future. So, for example, if you are writing about a thing which has already happened or which is going to happen, so we have uh, heard about the stories, Aesophian's tales, and many other tales, and even Cinderella's and the stories of the demons and the old man and the sea, like that. So there, it acts the time frame past, present, and future. So if you're writing about the present, you have to give importance to the present atmosphere, not the past one. You can't bring the past and the present and write about that, because none of them are going to understand what you're trying to say. So in that context, you have to keep the time frame to which you are writing. So it creates the psychological mood in the reader. See, even the atmosphere gets connected with the psychology of the reader. If you're describing an incident which is taking place in a forest, So you should narrate the sounds or how the forest is, what all the things which has been surrounded in the forest, what kind of experience if a person is alone who is going to undergo in the forest. Those things has to be brought in the story so that he psychologically gets connected with the mood of the reader. And also it tries to establish the locale, so it tries to bring the atmosphere to about which you are writing. So you get one with the atmosphere which you are trying to describe. Either it is a very sunny day or an incident takes place in the life of the protagonist on a summer season or in a winter season. So even Anton Chico has written many short stories, and also one such short story is a Griff, where he talks about an incident which takes place in the life of a person, a cab driver, what has happened, and the whole night, how he strives to just to share his grief with all the passengers who aboard his cab, but he couldn't. But at the end, he shares his feeling with his horse. In the same manner, you have to establish that locale in your story when you narrate it. So the atmosphere helps the writer in creating the texture of his imagined world with its characters local, either it is the environment. Say, for example, Disneyland. It is a simulacra which has been made by the man, but it is very much real to the, as if it appears it is a real world. So when people enters the Disneyland, they forget the outer world, they become one with the world in which they are into, they get into the fantasy world, so they enjoy the bliss and feelings what they undergo in Disneyland. In the same manner, here we can see that the atmosphere plays a very important role in writing a short story. So, next it talks about some story types where the imaginary world of a fiction. What is the imaginary world of a fiction? So, you imagine certain things. So, fictions is basically centers around the lives of imaginary characters and imaginary situations. See, we imagine a lot of things. If I tell you, for example, if I tell you to think about a dog, see, each one of them imagines a dog which might be in his house, or the stray dog, or the one he loves. So the image varies from one person to another person. So imaginary is of a character and imaginary situations is very important. Some of the elements that contribute to making this world authentic and lifelike are descriptions of time periods, of geographical locations, of people, their actions, and their conversation. For example, if you have chosen to write about a particular group of people, there you have to give importance to the accent, the language, what they speak, and also the kind of life which has been led by them. So when you write for the kids, they enjoy, that is, you might have come across many cartoons nowadays which has been brought telecasted in different TV channels. Either it is the channel which is related to the kids, that is cartoons, there you may come across Doraemon and many other no, that is Motu Patlu. Then many cartoon networks are there. Jam, that is I am not able to get the names. That is, if you have seen the Cartoon Network for kids, it has been designed, and only it is related to the kids which entertain them. So they are all the imaginary characters, but the kids try to love them. Even there was a Chota Bean and Doraemon and Motu Patlu and many other characters. And also here we can some of the elements that contribute to making this world authentic and lifelike. So whatever you write in the short story, whatever you imagine, it should be authenticated. It should be contributed to design the world in which they are living. and also descriptions of time period. So you have to choose a time period. So within that framework, it has to be written. And also the location, what you have chosen, it should not see one act, one incident taking place in one place and the other incident is taking place 1,000 miles away, cannot be brought together. So the places what you select, it should be in and around the place what you have chosen. So the people or for whom you're writing, the first thing you have to keep in your mind, for whom you're writing, their actions and their conversations is very important. So setting of time and also setting of the situation place is very important. Time and place plays a very important role in the narration or in the plot. Functions of atmosphere. So what are the functions of the atmosphere in the story? So the atmosphere of a story, as we understand, it could be with a little stretching, or it has its own functions. That is, it binds the story together. So it tries to bring the storyline together, and also it sets a time or a framework. Within that only the story is narrated. So try to create a mood in the reader, and also it establishes the locale, that is the place. Yeah, and it makes for economy and authenticity. So all these 5 points are very important, 6 points are very important when we write a story. So the it binds the story together. For example, this may explain how atmosphere can bind the story together. So try to give a realistic feeling. So if you imagine that if you're moving in a rainy day, what's happened to you, so or how you experience. So when you read a story, even the same kind of experience should be felt by the reader. In the same manner, it creates the mood. It's creates the mood for the reader. It makes him to feel emotionally, and also he becomes one with the story. And some story types where atmosphere is important. For example, atmosphere plays a very important role, and also it is why there are different types of environments we can see. And also the period of the novel matters, and not here but matters a lot. So there are some kinds of fiction in which atmosphere is everything, and the period novel and the ghost story, that is, atmosphere is very important. Why atmosphere is important? Because in because the short story writing and the novel write, though it started in the time of Chaucer, sees the Canterbury Tales, which were narrated by all the pilgrims who took up a journey to Thomas Becket's shrine. They were supposed to narrate four tales while going and while coming. So then itself the short story form had started in English literature. But though it was there in the past, even in the Greco-Roman period, there were stories, but they were not written form because they gave much importance to philosophical ideologies. And but only in the future time it got its importance. So, for example, in the period it started, we can see that the novels which were written in the 18th century, they had this the ghost stories, and also the fiction was cited in exotic lands. This novel is known as the Gothic novel. See, if the story runs around a place where it is abandoned by the people, the ghost novels are they were called as Gothic novels, and even they try to create that atmosphere in the stories. This novel, known as the Gothic novel, which depends from its interest mainly on atmosphere, moss, covers, castles, abaci, pointed Gothic acts, wild torrents, thick forests, desolates, molding chapels, and speculators. So, the atmosphere of the novel is often full of a sense of danger, and the threat hangs over everything and everybody. So, in these types of novel, a kind of tension is there which is present throughout the story. because the whole incident takes place in these atmosphere or in those places where it is covered with a by sea, or and also it is a desolated eats molding chapels and speculatures. So in that way, this novel is also called as a gothic, or it is a ghosty story. So the next point is that the ghost story, it is another form where much effort has to go into the evocations of the mood, a lonely house, strong winds, and rattling shutters. You might have seen in the movies, or for because why I give examples of the movies, it is the only source which you can recall now, because people watch a lot of movies in the present. In the past, people used to read stories from that, they were addicted to books from where they used to get, while reading they used to feel the sense and enjoy, but everything has been visualized now. And also you might have seen some ghost movies, the sound which at the background which is given makes a viewer horror. He feels somewhat anguish, or a kind of feeling which you can see in him. And also strong winds and rattling shutters. See, when a ghost enters a house, you can see that the wind will be breezing very fast, and even the window starts rattling. So in that kind of an experience is felt by the protagonist for where you are writing a story. The abstract or the dream-like story, Indian short stories have not branched off into the abstract and the dreamlike. One needs to study the stories of George Louis Borges of modern fiction. See, when it comes to Indian, there they have not written much horror type of short stories. And also, but if you want to study about the dreamy like and the abstract kind of things, you have to study the modern fiction writer by name George Louis Borges, where he discusses about how what is the present generation reads, and it is a dream like fiction, short stories, and how atmosphere is created. And some examples I can give here is that um, the detailed descriptions. So how the atmosphere created some things, detailed descriptions. For example, take for example some of the passages from Balthazar by Lawrence Durrell, where he writes. So I just read out a passage which has been given here. For example, you can see how these four things have been expressed by them: summer, buff sand, hot marble sky; autumn, sullen bruised grays; winter, freezing snow, cool sand, clear sky panels, glittering with might, washed delta greens, magnificent starscapes. And also spring season. There is no spring in the delta, no sense of refreshment and revelation in things. One is plunked out in winter into wax efficacy of a summer to ought to breathe. So when you talk about detailed description, so when you narrate about a season, for example, you might have read Ode to Autumn or Ode to Nightingale, which has been written by P.B. Shelley and all, John Keats or William Wordsworth, Daffodils. There it talks about that nature and how it was, either it was calm or how the wind were breezing. All these descriptions makes us to think about the environment. See, on winter seasons, the sky will be so clear, there will not be so clouds, too much cloudy. But when it comes to uh, spring or yeah, spring season, even the weather undergo changes. So to whatever the season you have chosen to write, you have to think about the atmosphere and how the world looks like, and how even the kind of dress they wear in the winter season, the kind of dress they wear, and the food habits they have in summer season. So all these things matters a lot when you write a short story, because you have to give whatever the storyline you have chosen, for whom you're writing, for the people, or for the day what you have chosen. Even you have to give importance to the culture, the food habits, and the dressing sense. Everything should correlate with the day to day or the theme what you have chosen. Because when you talk about autumn season, you have, or even there, you have to give importance to the dress what he is wearing. So the second point is economical touches. So to while writing, you might, some of the Indian writers, where they often discussed is about Mulk Rajan, and was one of the greatest pioneer, or the three trios what we call in India. They they try to create an atmosphere of pain and deprivation, and also we can see that the minimum use of words only because he highlights these details which build up the necessary tension. See, only few words are used in his writing to create that effect in the story. So, and also there is no contrasting picture or anticipating joy to dissipate the feeling of depression. So, economical touches somewhere where a few words itself convey what you are trying to say about the situation. So, piling of details. So, piling of details is another important aspects, or when you talk about this atmosphere. See, here it can create where the atmosphere can be conjured up just by a touch. The same effect can be so produced by the filling up of details. See, while you describe a feeling of a person, either he is in distress or in joy, how he expresses it, the way you pull up the details is also important. So some of the short stories which has been written by Anita Desai, a great writer of Indian, who talks about the scholars in Gypsy, where she peels with an American sociologist, David, and his wife Pat, who allows the Indian eat to beat her. The glazed eyes and the dropping air tell us in the first two sentences how she feels. See, Bombay takes over from her. Coconut shells, beetle stained walls, fish scales, and clipper stamps. She finds the people so large and vital and forceful in their brilliant clothes and their metallic voice and their eyes that flashed over like barbers' shears, cutting and exposing the sea. She feels crushed rather than revived. For example, when you think about a place which where you are, whatever, if you are missing some places, or if you try to bring those elements in them, so how you go, you get a realistic experience. All these things has been revealed there. So when she thinks about, for example, the great writer Anita Desai, she remembers a place that is Bombay, what all these things she misses from that particular places, which gave enjoyment to her, a kind of bliss which she attained when she was there, which she is not feeling that. When she tried to write these points in a story, she tried to give a realistic experience. When a reader reads, he may also sense that what all the things which has been missed by the protagonist or the writer. In the same manner, the next important aspect, that is the third unit, what is it talks about in this course 3, is that the character. See, why character is important. For example, the first thing we gave importance to the plot, the structure, and the next thing is atmosphere. After deciding what is the theme of writing and the place of writing, and the third point is the character. So the third thing is character. Why character is important? See, when you start writing a plot, even you have to choose about a character. Without characters, you can't design a plot. Character plays a very important role in the plot. So, when you start writing a short story, which is basically a story of the human conditions as the writer sees it, consequently, it has to have human characters. Apart from the events that happen to them, it's important for the storyteller too. So, Without characters, you can't write a story. Even in some of the books which have been written satirically and allegorically by George Orwell or Jonathan Swift, where they talk about where animals have become the protagonist of the novel. So they talk like human beings, and also they're all called as allegorical or satirical novels or short stories. So the consequence what you choose for writing a story because it runs around the human characters. And it's important for the storyteller to introduce some characters. And when you choose a character, you have to choose the character very carefully. And also because they are the representatives of the society. Whatever the things happen in the society, because we say that literature is a part and parcel or it is a mirror of the society, because whatever happens in the society, the same thing has been depicted in the literature. So, in that way, literature is the mirror of the society. So, in that context, whenever you choose a character, it should be with you should choose it very carefully because it has its universal appeal. The whole world will be reading that. So, develop them in a harmonious interaction with events. So, the character should go hand in hand with the events which has been designed. See, you have to reduce the impression they create at the point of climax so that you may achieve the best results with your story. The ending, that is in the climax, it should be so realistic that they should not feel that it is artificial. And also, what impression they get or must be the best impression. So maximize the impression. So try to minimize or maximize the impressions they create at the point of climax. So what you wanted to achieve can be achieved by the end of the story. So while choosing a character, you think that for whom you're writing, what is the purpose of this story, who are the major characters, and also in a conventional story, short story, it would be useful to lay down the structure first, as it is the turn of events that provides the result, and then summon the characters. But when you I hope you might have read the stories which has been written in the past, or you might have read the stories of the Greco-Roman period or some folk tales which has been narrated to you by your parents or grandparents, and it has its own structure, morality, loyalty can be seen, and there will be a logic at the end of the story. And also it tried to prove the result or what the characters used to summon up. And also, while choosing the characters, be careful setting out the plot. See, when you choose a character, see to that the plot suits the character. And also, you should mentally get equipped, and conditioning of the characters is relatively more important than the situation they are required to handle. See, for when you design a plot or a character or a storyline, when you write the dialogues for the characters, you have to be very careful whether the dialogue or what the words you have set up will suit that particular character. So it should the character is relatively more important than the situation. So character is very important than the situation because they should handle it very carefully. And also, in choosing your character, you have to bear in mind that there is hardly any place in a short story as distinguishing from a novel where a character is not called upon to make a substantial contribution to the interplay. Referred to above, but it allowed merely to add the atmosphere or the scenario. See, while choosing the characters, you should keep in your mind that there hardly any place in a short story. See, because you're writing, because You should not bring unnecessary characters in the short story. It should be very much relevant to the story what you are writing, and also more characters should not be incorporated as it has been incorporated in a novel, because by the time if there are more than 5 to 6 characters, it will get clumsy and it will run out of the context. So in that way, so when it comes to a novel, there might be numerous characters, and many people come across in the life of the protagonist. It might have, in a novel, it might have started with 3 generations, where, as we have read in D.H. Lawrence The Rainbow, where it talks about the 3 generations story. But it should not be like that. If you have chosen a character like Emma, it should, you should talk about 2 to 3 incidents, or 1 or 2 incidents which takes place in the life of that particular protagonist. So in that way, you have to give importance to the character. You have to bear in your mind that for whom you're writing and what is the purpose, the place what you have chosen, everything matters a lot. Choose only such characters as you can visualize in fairly clear dimension right to the start. See, even he or she tried to say that you have to choose such only few characters which is runs in the clear dimension right from the start to the end. Are confident of making all and full bodied during the course of the story. You should see that the whole thing, what you are trying to say or what you are trying to convey, as being conveyed through this incidents and the characters, and are confident and make whole and full body during the course of the story. So it should be so naturalistic that what you're writing should reach the mass and also can visualize in fairly clear dimensions right from the start till the end of the story. See, what are the parameters to be observed in choosing of characters? See, it's not that so easy to choose all the characters and bring them in a short story. Even the selection of characters is very important. It should not be lunatic, clown, but it should choose. So, what for what purpose or what is the message you want to render? Why you have chosen these characters? So it is very important. So even while choosing a characters, you have to have certain parameters in yourself. The parameters you will do adopt in the choosing of characters are however common to all fictions, novels, or short stories, and would lead you to formulate answers to the following questions among others. Because when you, if somebody questions about the choice or the characters which you have brought in the story, you should be able to answer to them what was the purpose of bringing that particular character in that storyline, and why is important, what is the role played by that character. So when you select a character, their characters from a different milieu has to be chosen, and characters from should be from the myths and legends, and they should have natural phenomena as characters, and also whether all these things are known. See, for example, if you're choosing certain characters from the classical age or the Greco-Roman period or the ancient age, even the atmosphere, you have to create the same atmosphere which existed in during that particular period. And also, if you're talking writing about the legends and myths, you have to give importance to the place, the people, and the culture, the society, economy of that time. So it should flow in such a natural way that nowhere the share should feel that it is artistic. So does the reader know them? The other point what you have to keep in your mind is that you should not ignore the consideration that they should not also be entirely unfamiliar to your target audiences. See, the characters you chose should be familiar to the readers. Don't choose characters which are not familiar to the readers because they will not be able to grasp what you're trying to say. So, for example, a writer has to think twice before choosing characters from the Scandinavian society because when we choose a character from the Scandinavian society, we are not aware what kind of people lived during that period because whatever we have read has been read through the books and that information we have in us, and we are not known well about those characters. So while choosing the characters, even you have to give importance to the things which are in and around you. So before whatever the things you start, because a writer will not be writing for himself, it will be for it will be his own for a period of time. Unless it is completed and published, it never belongs to him, it belongs to the public. They're the one who decides whether it is good or bad or to what group it will reach. And the characters, they're the one who criticize it, or they are the one who decides whether it is a good or a bad. And so always you have to keep the reader in your mind before writing a story. Without, because you're writing for, you are not writing for yourself, you're writing for the mass, the universal perception. So when you write, you have to keep the whole Europe in your mind, the whole world in your mind, and write. So because without knowing the mindset of the reader, you can't write a story. And so always you have to keep in your mind for whom you're writing and what is the purpose of writing, all those things. So the third thing is, do you like them? Whether you like it or not, do you like them? See, is being used here in the biased connection, we can say. As you are a writer of a fiction, you are no doubt obliged to distance yourself from your character and then enter into the personality of each, making him play his assigned role in the story. So, as you are a writer, see, even Aristotle tells that when you choose the characters, when you start writing for them, you have to stand in his place and think like that person and write. So when all kind of temptations, either it is good, bad, or the things happens to a human being, or because each and every feelings matters a lot, either it is anger, or self aggressions or sympathy or empathy, and good or bad things, ugly, beautiful. So all these things has to be, in spite of yourself, you have to bring them. So don't give importance to your feelings, because when you're talking about that particular subject or an object or an incident, you have to bring all sorts of things there. So in that way, you should not, either you like it or not, but you have, when you're writing, you have to give importance to all these aspects. So the other point is that when you start writing a story, how you're going to develop the characters. See, already you have chosen the characters, you have assigned the role, what they're going to play, or what is the role of that particular character in that story. Either is a brother or a sister or a father or mother, any kind of relationship which they have with the protagonist. So the next thing is that the development of the character. So all the stories, there should be the kind of development should take place in the character. They should grow, they should learn and grow, as it happens in the novel Great Expectation, which has been written by Charles Dickinson. The protagonist of that novel is Pip. So at this stage, formulate certain aims and hopes for your story, perhaps to amuse, shock, charm, or educate your fellow beings, or just to make them sit up and think. So you have to amuse them, or make them educate, or if you have to make them charm, or try to make them revolve around the story with a particular kind of actions or thoughts or things. The barest outline of a plot and the general appearance and disposition of the characters you will have to interact with the events towards the fulfillment of your aims have been laid down. See, what was the intention of writing this story? You wanted to pass a kind of message to the society. Whether you have attained that or not through that particular character, whether the interactions with the events is towards the fulfillment of aims and objects, you have to see. So when you write a story, you have to see that whether the purpose for writing is being achieved by you. So, do they have to be characters? The characters what you chose, they should not be stereotypes, and they should not be extraordinary. So, for example, nowadays we have seen some movies which has been produced or directed by the Hollywood people, where it takes to a alien world which we have not seen or known, but we say that they make us to think that this kind of people are present in other planets. So none of us are aware that still it is there or not, also we don't know. But through imagination, animation, and all these things they have created a fantasy world which we imagine it is realistic. So keep the ordinary and typical. So don't go beyond your thinking. Try to see that they are typical human beings and characters which are living in and around us. No archetypes of things should be brought into. So don't try to bring archetypal things in writing a short story. So there should be realistic to, and they are known to the world and where they can understand. For next point, he says is the growth of the characters. What is it is one of the important aspects we can see say that where do they get from? Yeah, see the growth of a characters. Any characters, howsoever well convinced, would appear to be wooden or static if he just moved along with the demands of the plot and react predictably. See, there should the characters should denote movement in time, place, and actions plays a very important role in the character. They should, whatever the character you should have chosen, they should give justice to the role they are playing. And also, it should not be like artificiality. They are not moving with the pace. They should respond to the each and every moment which has been incorporated in the story, and also it should process of his thoughts and actions. See, the personality should unfold himself and process his thoughts and action according to the situation. He should not be a static person. He should move in a dynamic way, and also he should interact with each and every actions which he is performing. A kind of reaction should be there in his role. And also, we can see that his personality must unfold itself in the process of his thoughts and actions so that he reveals himself fully and often surprisingly only at the end of the story. And also, his personality is very important because he should unfold himself. See, we remember certain persons in the novels or which we have read because the way he give justice to the one who is in a pathetic condition, or the role played by that particular character in that novel or in a movie, because he has not violated any kind of mannerisms. So in that way it makes us to think about that. So in that way, when you read when you introduce a character, they should always remain in the mind of the people. For you might have watched the movie Charlie Chaplin or Mr. Bean. Even it remains, even though it was directed in the past, but even now it gives the same kind of feelings which are given in the 70s and 80s, we can say. So in the same manner, it should be reveal himself fully and often surprisingly only at the end of the story. So the revelation of the character should be brought at the end of the story. The personality, what he is, should be shown. See, sometimes we will be talking about a person who is like is a gentleman. So in what way is gentleman? He possesses all the good qualities which has to be in a person. So in that way, at the end of the story, he has to reveal what he is. Take care to see that the pace is not too uneven. See, the storyline should move in such a way that where it should not get disconnected or where you have brought something else in between the story. So it should go in such a pace till the end of the story where it should not appear uneven. And also, you should not allow the characters to play all his acts right at the beginning and end. See, when you start writing a story, don't see that all the major what you were supposed to convey in the end of the story should not be brought in the beginning of the story. So you have to create such a kind of environment or an atmosphere where a kind of tension will be prevailing in all the readers and the listeners till the end of the story. At the climax only it has to be revealed. You should ensure that the surprise of a revelation at the end is not such as would seem to be totally out of character and hence unbelievable. The reader should not believe that it is out of the storyline. So it should go in such a pace that each and everyone will understand that a kind of logicity or a morality has been imparted in that story through the characters. The writer speaks through the character. See, sometimes what happens here is that the writer is the one who speaks through his characters. What he wanted to say has been conveyed through the characters. Even we can see in some of the Shakespearean plays where Shakespeare himself speaks through the characters, and even Dante has spoken uh, through Picardio. In that way, all characters need to be treated alike. See, you should not degrade about the characters. It just high or low. Each and every character should be treated alike because each character has its own importance. So, whenever you write a short story, it has to be written in the first person narration. So, first person narration is very important because you are the one who are the omniscient who are trying to say what's happening, how it's going to happen. So, always a story should be in a first person narration. It should not be in a second person or third person narration. So, when you write a story, it should be in the first person narration. Every person in the world is largely self righteous. So, try to treat them essentially with sensible and goodness in all. So the last part is the ending. So how an ending has to be. What he says is that not all characters need have a memorable exit line. The minor ones may as well slink away after doing the job. But the final results, namely the impact you would like to create with whatever you have to say on the human condition, depends immeasurably for its success on the famous last lines of the central character. Before he leaves the stage, the climax is vitally important for your story. So, what he tried to say here is that a character should be very memorable, but when even though it exits from the storyline, even after you have read the story, the character should remain in the mind of the reader. Such a kind of impression has to be created in the character. So you should not treat any character high or low. Each one of the role is very important in the short story, and each should be valued in the same status. And also, you should not create that a character is low and high because all human beings lives in this society. So the condition which depends immeasurably for its success on the famous last lines of the central character. So the whole story will be based on the climax. So whenever you write a story, you should see to that the climax is very important. Climax should end in such a way that where it reaches the climax or the what the message you wanted to convey, either morally or logically, it is conveyed through that particular character. The climax is vitally important for the story. So the climax is very important for the story. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Without the beginning, there is no end. So you have to see that even the time, place, and action has been given important in the story. So, what is the role of a melodrama? The character should not normally leave the stage with a bang, say, in a flood of tears or uproarious laughter to underscore the revelation. See, what he tried to say is that plays of melodrama. The characters, they should not leave the stage or leave the play by crying or by banging the stage or with flood of tears or uproarious laughter or to underscore the revelation. So he says that these types of things should not be incorporated in the where the ending is left to the denouncement of the or the understanding of the reader or the listener. So such type of action should not be performed on the stage. And also he says that they should normally leave the stage without making see these kind of actions. And the last thing is the revelation of the extent to the revelation. The revelation should not be too revealing. What is provided to the character and through him to the reader at large should be no more than a flash, an opening out to some tantalizing possibilities, though it may massacre as illumination. So extend to the revelation. You should try to reveal what is to be revealed. So, what is the purpose of telling that thing? So, without that, you can't, through that particular character to the reader. So, you have to keep in your mind that what is the purpose of the ending, what you're trying to say, what is the message which has been left by the uh, character at the end of the story. So, for example, the passage which has been depicted in one of the play, it says like this: there should be a natural break is that see natural way of action should be performed. There should not be too artificiality. If there is more artificiality, it is not real, it will not be true to the human life. So you should not try to create artificiality more in the writing of the people in the story. So the last part is narration. Narration, and this is also very important. Why it is important? The way you narrate, the way you convey the message. See, first thing is you have designed a plot, you have given a structure how it has to be, and you have chosen the atmosphere on which day or what is the purpose of writing. If it is a ghost, you have to bring the darkness, dullness, shabby look, and the atmosphere should be created in a it takes place in a very hunting in an hunting house that way or a ruined place where the ghost stays. So that atmosphere has to be brought, and the characters who he introduces in that particular short story, that should be limited, and also you should see that they have their own identity. Each and every character is important in the storyline. The next comes the narrative part. What is narrative part? The way of writing or the way you convey the message. And narration is an important element of several other forms of literature as well. Narration in the short story, it is easy to see, is different from that in the novel or other types of narrative writing. The narration in the short story is more closely linked with its other elements than it is in other forms of writing. One might even say that it is the atmosphere or the character or the plot which determines the narrative mode in the short story. So narration is very important element about as the other forms of literature we can say, because in narration in a short story is different from the narration of the novel or poetry or drama or other forms of writing, because the narration or the way you write the story it is very closely linked with one another elements, because a kind of link you can see in the narration of short story. It's not too prolonging where you are not pulling it for thousands of pages. It may run within 10 pages, or because if you add up more 4 to 5 incidents, all these things has been explained. So in that way, it is not when you write a short story, because the short story is very closely linked with its other elements, and also because it differs from other form of writing. When you write for example, when you write a poem, it is written in the stanzaic form, or in an epic form, or elegy, or epic, or lyric, ode, sonnet. So there are various forms of writing, and even the subject of these forms of poetry is entirely different from one another. In the same way, even in writing the novel, it varies. And even in the short story, the elements that you have chosen, it is in other forms of writing. So, because here, even the atmosphere, the character, the plot are the one which is going to determine the narrative mode of the storyline. So, what is the art of the short story? How you are going to write a short story? Because the story is one of the most ancient forms of literature. It is almost as ancient as the conscious use of human speech. Stories in oral form have been circulated for thousands of years, and even the written short story is an ancient form. See, earlier, short stories were not written, it was narrated orally. It has passed from one person to another person, from generation to generation, it has been circulated. It is considered as the oldest form of writing, or oldest form of ancient literature, we can see. And also, it has an history of thousands of years. And even later, when the alphabet or the scripture form came, it was brought down to the scriptures. Until then, it was orally transmuted from one person to another person. But the short story is a well defined subgenre in modern literary form, and epics have stories in them. And tragedies, comedies, and the novel tell a story or many stories at the same time, but the short story wakes up from all of them and acquires its own distinct form. See, a short story is well defined, it has its own genre, and even in the modern literary forms or epics in short story, in even in the epics, you come across subplots, short stories have been incorporated into that to make it an epic. And in tragedies, comedies, romances, historical texts have been written, and novels have come, and even dramas have been written in all these forms of writing. But when it's come to short stories, it breaks this genre and it has its own entity. See, characters of narrations in the short stories are being compressed through by for its style. The effects of comparison is really in the feeling of expanding into life, which a short story on its completion includes. There is more life in a short story than it actually presents. See, short stories have more life than any other form of writing essays. Why? Because they talk about an incident or 2 to 3 incidents in the life of the protagonist, or they try to convey a message through these characters in the story. So always the short stories remains in the mind of the reader or the listener, rather than a novel or any other form of writing. So because it has its own uh, comprehension, because it is compressed, and also it cannot be compared with any other part of life. So short story is actually presents the realistic reality or real reality of the human society, and also it talks about a particular incident or a subject. So the difference between narrative methods of the novel and the short story. Because when it comes to the narrative technique in the short story, it is it has its own limitations. But when it comes to the narration of a novel, because there it will be where you will be discovering, you will be answering to that, there will be challenges and the necessity of brevity, you can see all these things in a novel. See, it may runs around 100 characters or 50 characters, or all the people come across in the life of the protagonist and the incidents which takes place from his lifetime. So in that way it moves on either from good to bad or bad to good. But there is a difference between the events in because it is episodic in the novel, but when as it comes to the short story, it's events. So it is completely based on the events in the short story. So the next thing is that the definiteness of style in the short story springs from the fact that there is nothing to follow, nothing to fall back upon, no further space of life to look forward to. So there's a lot of definiteness in the style which you are trying to see, or which you are going to use in the short story, because you will be talking about the facts and events in the life of the protagonist. So it's not dragging like 1,000 pages. You're not pulling is all the things into 100 pages or 1,000 pages, which takes place in the life of the protagonist. It's only based on certain facts and effects, through that what he learned or what he was supposed to convey. So in that way there is lot of different, there is definiteness in, you can see the definiteness in the short story rather than which you can see in the novel. The end of the story is the end. It is either achievement or failure, whatever it might be. Either the protagonist has achieved or there is a failure. That is the end in the short stories. But whereas when it comes to the novel writing, it may continue how he overcome that situation, what happened in the future. Many things would be added to that. But whereas in a short story, if something happens at the end, that is the end of it. There is no continuation. The style of the novel as a rhythm of peaks and valleys, it may remember its may way through life. So the style of the novel is a rhythm of peaks. There are a lot of things which are brought together in a story, like valleys, but whereas in a short story, it talks about certain incidents or certain things which it has taken in the life of the people. So every short story must communicate the sense of a discovery. See, every short story should try to render or try to deliver a sense of discovery. Something happens at the end of the story where either it is discovered or recognized, or it is an event where he is trying to, from that which he has learned in his life, or that is the end of his life, either death or joy. So the short story writer also finds his piece fully formed in his imagination. So the short story writer always keeps in his mind that what he has tried to convey has been conveyed or achieved through that. And also there are the Russian, the French short stories are the best stories which we can see. He says that in some of the stories of the Russian and the French short story writers, they are the Chaco and Guy de Maupassant, and where in the stories of Maupassant and Chico, there is nowhere any sense of hurry, effort, manipulation, or an excessive energy in point to the basic insight of the story. See, in these writers' stories, there is no hurry, they have not put for effort manipulations. There is no excessive energy has been used to convey the things. It moves in such a phase that so systematically, which is true to realistic life and reality, where they portray the reality in their short stories. And also the second rareness in a short story. That is what makes the difference between Mubsen and Chekhov on the one and O. Henry on the other. See, there is another writer by O. Henry where he has put a lot of obviousness, effort in order to point out the finger to an effect. So, this fellow has used lot of efforts to convey what he wanted to convey. But the same thing cannot be seen in the stories which has been written by Chekhov and Obsan. See, the narrative mode of great short story writers, and in English, when it comes to the English short story writers, it gives an example that what is the difference between the French as well as the Russian short story writers, because the Russians are known for their short story writing, and even the French, because they were the one who introduced the sonnet forms. The French were the one who introduced the sonnet form, and later it was introduced in English literature by Petrarch, Sir Batten Surrey. So, in the same manner, in literary tradition, French literature is closer to English than Russian, and that is why Mopsant has been a more influential model than Chekhov. See, the French were the Russians had not influenced the English writers, but the French has influenced the English people a lot. Even in 17th century, when Charles II returned from exile to England, he brought with him the French literature, the French culture, and French mannerism to England. So, in the beginning of 17th century, there was no literature which was creative, but it was they imitated the French literature. There was transcriptions, so we can see there was translations, more translations was carried out during that period. So in that way, they imitated French a lot rather than the Russian literature. So Mupsant is more influential than Chekhov to the English writers. Edgar Allan Poe is another great writer who talks or who brings the realistic atmosphere in his writing. Somerset Maugham was very conscious of the heart in his short stories. D.H. Lawrence's delineation of the mystery and complexities of life. He tried to bring the complexities of life in his short stories, which we can see even in the novel what he has written, that is Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, and all. James Joyce, the autonomy of style, she has her own style of writing. He has his own style of writing, and Hemingway rigorous and bare style can be seen in Ernest Hemingway's writings. These are some of the writers. We can see the theme or the methodology or the approach they used in their narrative techniques, and also there's a lot of difference between the French, the Russians, and the English writers. So narration is also very important in writing a short story, because short stories are the one which deals with facts and events which takes place in the in and around the society, or the experience of a person. So when we start writing a story, these are all the major points. First thing we have to keep in our mind, the first thing is plot, structure. The second one is the atmosphere, and the third one is the characters, and the last one is the narrative technique. So every form of writing is based on narrative technique. The narrative technique is one of the major component of literature and writing, we can say. Thank you. Here we are going to end the class. If you have any doubts, you can. Masaika, do you have any doubts?
I think no doubt, madam. Very good presentation, madam. Really,
Thank
very
you, sir.
nice. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Madam, thank you. Very good presentation. Very nice.
Thank you,
Really
sir.
good. Really
Thank you,
good.
sir.
Masika, you attend tomorrow also same time, madam class. Masika.